What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Monday Scale News Update. I had a great weekend. I hope you all did too. We had a handful of topics from last week. Let's jump into them. First off, let's start with the release from Proline last week. They released a 1978 C10 race truck body for this slash or short course style trucks. Not exactly scale off-road like we do normally with the rock crawlers and things like that, but still a pretty good looking body that's got some cool retro flair. Just kind of cool looking, caught my eye, something to spice up an old slash that you may have laying around. If you're interested, link in the description below. Now, last week we discussed that Redcat was teasing 5 new vehicles, and we finally saw the information on that. They released 5 new vehicles. One of them was a 1/5 scale monster truck. However, the 2 releases that relate most to the type of vehicles that we're normally talking about on this channel would be the Camo X4 and the Camo TT. Now, there are several styling cues on the X4 that really make it look a lot like an axial Yeti. And then the actual chassis layout also has a lot of very similar cues in that same way. It does have a plastic tub, 4-link rear suspension. The rear structure that supports the shocks also looks a lot like an axial Yeti. The transmission layout is much more simpler and something that reminds me more of like the Baja Ray or Rock Ray style transmission though. It does have a nice low CG motor placement. The cost on these street price shows a $329 price range with a brushless system as well. Initially when I saw these, I think they were listed at $389, but I think that was more of a retail and less of an actual street price. So at $329, these look like maybe a better option than they initially did when I first saw it. Now the TT version is a trophy truck version, or that style at least. Now, it is very similar to the Axial Score trophy truck. However, as we know, that Score trophy truck has been discontinued, so that option doesn't exist from Axial anymore. We do have the Losi Baja Ray still, and that would probably be the closest competition that I see to this new Redcat. I don't think the body styling on the TT is nearly as good as the Losi Baja Ray or the now discontinued Yeti Score. However, it's something that is less expensive, is available now, and Redcat is making more of a push to find its way into more stores for better replacement parts and things like that. Now, I myself have not personally had a real positive experience with the Redcat products up to this point. I know that they keep trying to improve things like that. Maybe these will be better. Many of us know that a Yeti style or a Rock Ray style vehicle does have a lot of stress on the parts. Probably any of us that have owned either the Yeti or the Rock Ray have found that those weak links can find themselves quickly. We'll just have to wait and see and observe how the new X4 stacks up in those departments. I'll put links to those new products in the description below as well. And after all of that Baja Ray and Rock Ray talk, Exotech did release a new stainless steel front skid plate for both of those cars. This kind of bridges that section between the front A-arms back into the center section of the chassis. This is a known weak spot on those cars where you can actually break the front of that aluminum chassis off completely. This will help bridge that and hopefully try and reduce the risk of you snapping off that expensive aluminum chassis. I'll throw a link to the Exotech in the description below. Just before Axial Fest, I missed the release of this new piece from AMain. They call this the Trail Keg, and it's actually just this nice little container that you use to store in either tools or parts, a number of different things in, and it's meant to be able to take it with you on the trail. It's just a nice container, and inside it does come with a cloth mat that you can use to hold tools, parts, things like that. Comes with a small little 5.5mm wrench that's laser cut. Just a handy piece to have. The top of it comes with a magnet that you can shoe glue into place to help hold, ferrous materials, either body clips or steel hardware, things like that. Just a nice piece, and it was actually something that piqued my interest. I'm looking to do an ammo can style on-the-go toolbox that I would use to take to events or crawls on the weekend, things like that, where I would have a selection of parts inside that I would use commonly. This little Trail Keg looks like something that I could use to build into that, or nice to have carrying around in your backpack. AMain produced a video outlining a lot of the details, showing how it can be used with tools, hardware, or spare parts. If you'd like more information on the Trail Keg, you can find some links in the description below. And that will pretty much do it for the news topics for the week. However, I did post up on social media asking people for questions to discuss during the Scale News. So let's run through as many of them as we can. Quick answers, quick responses, moving on. Do you prefer plastic or metal bumpers? metal bumpers. I know Vanquish just released the VS410, but can you give any hints if there's more kits to come? No, I can't. Can SCX-102 brass knuckles go onto the VS410 axles? The axles underneath the VS410 are actually allergic to brass, so I do not recommend it. But in reality, many brass knuckles should work. There may have to be some clearancing done around the more beefy style C-hubs that are put onto the VS410 axles. VS410 or 69 Blazer build-off with Scale Builders Guild. I would like to do another build series with Scale Builders Guild. I just don't know what it should be. I don't think it should be a budget build right now. What's the best suggestion to add a bit of weight on the axles of the VS410? Unless in very specific circumstances, I'm not usually a big advocate of adding weight just for the sake of adding it. However, you could use a different set of wheels. You could add a brake weight of some sort or a brass knuckle. There is several options you could use. I don't think you should be looking at anything on the axle specifically, more on the either knuckle, the SLW hub style, or the wheels themselves. Those were the questions on Instagram. Now let's jump over to Facebook. This one's a little bit longer, but a good question still. This one says, you could start a conversation on the importance of buying from local hobby shops, supporting independent designers, craftsmen and women, and small batch companies like the one you work with the ongoing discussions on the value versus cost of the VS410. I think you might have a unique insight into the whole conversation. There's a lot to that question or statement here. Yes, the crawling side or scaling side of what we do now was really built by guys who wanted to build something along these lines, didn't have the parts to do it, and just made it happen. And it just slowly evolved from there. Before the SCX-10 chassis was even a thing, there was scale chassis you could buy that were made by guys who had, designed them and made a handful and got them out there and just slowly kept building, little things that just found popularity. And some of the larger companies came in and identified some of these areas, such as Axial, seeing that the scale market really was something to pay attention to. And then even though Axial wasn't a major, huge company like some of the other RC companies, they focused on that and they really created quite a name for themselves. But it all starts on a smaller level. Very few of these areas came from nothing and where a manufacturer just came up with something completely new on their own and made a market. Almost always it came from somebody else who was doing something either in their garage, on the side, after work, whatever it may be, trying to gain a little bit of popularity, trying to grab a foothold in the market. So yes, it is important to support the people who work hard to create original ideas, things like that, and try and grow their business. Let's jump into the next question though. With Team Associated advertising their new 8.8-inch wheelbase crawler as Sorca Class 1 and Class 2 legal out of the box, should Sorca adopt a rule that bodies must be within a set percentage of the 1/10th size of the real-life vehicle they represent? More rules, more math that most people can't understand. A lot of people don't understand how the scale calculations work, period. I think adding that rule in there would just make it worse. I think in general, trying to take that Team Associated CR12 and compete in Class 2 with it would be kind of, or actually ridiculous. Even in Class 1, maybe. I've got the CR12 here. I do plan to do a little bit of video on it, but while it may fit the rules, maybe, I'm not sure. I'd have to, actually go through and check off all the boxes and things like that. I think that it's just something they put on the box. Associated's probably just trying to dip their foot into this market. That wasn't an original design to them. That car had been released initially under the Thunder Tiger name with a different body, and now Associated came out with a truly licensed F-150 body, all that. It's just an entry into the market, see where it goes from there. But I don't think I would look too heavy into that or even consider adding more rules. The next question is, what makes something scale? And that's a really tough question because it's so subjective. It's something that it's different for me than it is maybe for you. Personally, I wouldn't call the 1/10 scale rock racer style Yeti scale. However, it's got some scale details and it is a smaller, somewhat version of like an Ultra 4 car in some ways, but I still wouldn't call that scale really. But many people would argue that point. And I think that that's exactly it. There isn't just a defined answer that you can give for that situation. So how do you answer that question? Which Origin parts will start to become available for sale on the VP site? For instance, Origin shock towers. Many of the replacement parts and things like that will start to pop up for sale here very soon, including the VXT tires, the Origin body set, the replacement shock tower parts, chassis braces, things like that. There'll be several of those things that you'll see. And then there's also been some that have already hit the site, like the Vanquish Velcro straps and the shoulder screws for the kingpins. And then as time goes, you'll also start to see a lot of the other parts that are needed for replacement, things like that, will become available as well. What's new with Dancing Riders this week? I didn't see anything new for Dancing Riders this week, otherwise I definitely would have covered it. What batteries do you recommend for 3S lipos for a Wraith with an RX4 with a Tekin 3100 ROC 412? I am running a RX4 and a 3100 ROC 412 in my Origin that I ran all day today. I'm running 5200 milliamp Hobby Star packs. They're an inexpensive pack that has actually performed really well for me. That's a large pack. I do believe you can fit that in the firewall area of a Wraith if you've relocated the battery to the front, or of course it will fit in the stock placement of the Wraith in the back. And the last question is, what's with double bumpers? Seriously, people. If you're not familiar with what double bumpers mean, just look at a lot of vehicles that come from some of the manufacturers where they may have a bumper molded into the Lexan of the body and then also have a bumper on the chassis. That is what double bumpers means. Bumpers on bumpers. It's something that you can tell when people really aren't all that in tune with what scale is, or aren't really paying attention to the details of the scale model they're building. Try not to have bumpers on bumpers. Cut the Lexan bumpers off your body when you can. Put a real bumper on the chassis. Traxxas. But I think that's going to do it for this week's Scale News Update. Hope you guys have a great week coming up. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're not already. Watch for the Scale News every Monday. And we'll see you on the next one.